welcome to part 3 of FS7 Diaries with me, Ben Clayton. I want to start with an apology because it's taken me about 4 months to get round to making this third part because I've been very busy filming with the FS7, lots of editing jobs too, and I also moved house, so there's been so much going on. And episode 3 is new and improved because I'm filming it in 4K on the FS7 and on the iPhone 7. Over the last 4 or 5 months, I've filmed about 10 projects on the camera. I've been to Mexico to film a conference, I've been up to the Midlands to film some promos for Ginster's Pasties, and I've also filmed some pilot scenes for a feature film that a friend of mine is trying to develop. So one thing I wanted to quickly talk about was 4K and UHD. The FS7 will record in 4K 4096 by 2160, which is also, cinema DCI 4K. Now, the other flavour of 4K is UHD, and that's 3840 by 2160, so commonly referred to as 2160p. So if you're filming at 2160p, and if you're delivering at 1920 by 1080, you can punch in 100% onto that 3840 image, 2160p image, and move the camera, reframe the shot in your editing software. So I've done a few jobs where we filmed like that, and you frame your talking head quite wide, and then in the edit you've got the ability to punch in 100% to make a close-up image, and obviously when you cut out the content that the person is saying you don't want, it looks like you were filming on 2 cameras. It's not as good as having 2 cameras, but it's a really good way of doing that if you've only got the budget for 1 camera, 1 cameraman. Something else I wanted to cover in this film was give a little bit more detail about the ND filter. I've talked before about the variable and the presets. So in the preset mode, you've got the rolling dial and you've got the 3 presets. They can actually be changed between 6 different preset settings on the camera. So starting from 1/4 and going up to 128th, and then 6 settings in between, or 4 settings in between. If you're in variable mode, I actually worked this out today, there are 21 different variations on the ND. So it starts at 1/4, and then it goes a 5th, a 6th, a 7th, and then it incrementally steps up and you go all the way to 128th. And for those who don't know, with a 1/4 ND, you're letting in 1/4 of the light. So that's a big difference. You're only letting in 25% of the light. So when you step down to 1/128th, you're only letting in 128th of the light to the sensor. So that's a tiny amount. So obviously if you're filming in really bright conditions and bright sunlight, you're only letting in a little bit of light. I've used the variable ND quite a few times filming outside, and it is very useful to be able to just dial in a little bit more ND or a little bit less ND, and keeping your f-stop, your aperture as you want it to get the stylistic look, to get the depth of field generally. So really pleased with that, and that was one of the reasons I bought the camera in the first place over one of the Canon cameras that don't have the variable ND. So I think it's been really well executed. It's a bit complicated to work out how to use it with the preset, the variable, the switches and the dial, and also the fact that there's an auto mode, but you get your head around it, and if you made it more simple, it wouldn't offer the flexibility for the professional user. I did a job about 3 months ago, and we were filming some interviews for a charity, and we had one room for about 6 hours, and we interviewed I think 7 or 8 people. So we were able to light the room in 5 or 6 different ways to get nice different angles for each of the talking heads. And the location was normally used for live music, so there were no windows. So we turned all the internal lights off, and we just lit it with my simple 3-light setup. And I was really pleased with the camera's performance in low light. I'll show some footage over the top of this so you can see what I mean. I've had a few opportunities to use the S&Q motion function for vari speed. So you can undercrank and overcrank. You can go down to, I think, 1 frame a second. And then all the way up to 180. But it'll only do 180 in NTSC mode, which I suppose is a multiple of approximately 30, so 6 times the speed of normal NTSC at 30, 2997. In PAL it'll do 150, so again 6 times 25. But clearly you can go into NTSC to shoot 180 for your PAL projects, because in the timeline it'll still work. Depending on your NLE, you might have to do some converting, but you'll just get then 7 and a bit times slower. And obviously it's only in 1080p. It won't do more than 50 or 60 frames a second in 4K. I'm going to edit a montage after this little piece to camera with lots of the footage I've shot over the last few months, 4K, HD, slow-mo, there's probably some overcrank stuff too because you can do the interval record, and I'm going to use your favourite music track which I've used for 3 videos now, but I paid for it, so you're just going to have to get used to it. It's tolerable, I think, I hope. that about wraps it up for episode 3. I promise episode 4 will be quicker coming than episode 3, and please subscribe or like if you're enjoying watching these films. Cheers!